The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight. So, welcome to Urban Fantasies, your fortnightly fix of weird tales, urban legends, magic, and folklore. And now here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
It's Thursday night, it's late. This is our sixth show, so hello to you in Paranormal Radioland. I'm Charles Christian, and with me is Janie.
Hi, and tonight we have another packed show with not one but two great interviews. But first, we start with some superstitions and folklore we've encountered in the last week.
We start off with a follow-up to our story last time about the woods you should and should not burn on a bonfire. Just to remind you of the line that we quoted last time, 9 woods into the cauldron go, burn them fast and burn them slow. But the elder is the lady's tree, burn it not or cursed you'll be. As we were recording the show, Jason Wick, who puts the show together for us here at Goat Pen Studios in Norfolk, happened to comment that the couplet about elderwood does actually make sense, as elder does not make a very satisfactory firewood. Apparently it burns quickly without generating much heat and may actually dampen down a fire you already have blazing. It can also produce a thick acrid smoke, and if you think that's bad enough, the Mexican elder, which is found in the American South, contains a natural form of cyanide, so breathing the smoke can cause cyanide poisoning.
Right, and thanks to some visiting friends this week, and you know who you are, here's another superstition that I'd never heard of before. And apparently, a visitor should always leave through the same door from which they entered. And you should certainly never go in the front door and then immediately out another door without first sitting down again in the house. So it's believed that it's bad luck for both the visitor and the homeowner. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of this one?
No, I hadn't.
Yeah. Anyway, I had a quick trawl through the reference books, and it reveals it goes back at least, until about the mid-19th century, and it's international in scope, with sightings in England, Ireland, Greece, Eastern Europe, North America. See, well, actually, I was scoffing at this until I remembered that I do have a superstition about not putting shoes on the table being bad luck. Yeah, I know, it's a bit crazy, isn't it?
Not round here where we've got dogs. You never know quite what you got on the sole of your shoes.
Yeah. And of course, this time of year, don't forget, autumn. You know the dog turds are out there. You just don't know where. Under the leaves, that is. Okay.
Yes, the poo is out there.
Yeah.
Finally, one of my Facebook contacts in New Zealand, the photographer Heidi Padane, recently posted up a picture she'd taken showing several bunches of bananas hanging up in a net on a fishing boat. Heidi happened to say that this was odd, as she was under the impression bananas were regarded as bad luck on fishing boats. This was a new one on me, so I did some digging and found there was a whole bunch, see what I did there, of superstition about bananas on fishing boats. Not just the obvious one, you could slip on a discarded skin and fall overboard. In fact, it seems the superstition relates not just to the bananas as a fruit, but anything even remotely to do with bananas, including banana muffins and even items of clothing containing the word banana, such as Banana Republic. Popular explanations include, back in the days of sailing ships, if one of them happened to sink and had the misfortune to sink, very often its cargo, in this case bananas, would be one of the few things found floating on the surface, thereby leaving people to think that perhaps the fruit itself had caused the mishap. And there's another one that because sailing ships transporting bananas would always sail as fast as possible so the bananas wouldn't spoil before they reached their destination, any crew members attempting to fish over the side of the boat would never catch anything. And finally, spiders, snakes and other poisonous vermin live in bananas, and carried in a hold on a long-haul trip, they would definitely expand their horizons by infesting other areas of the parts of the ship, and, in some instances, biting and killing members of the crew.
Oh, so that's put me off the only fruit that I actually eat, bananas.
I thought chocolate cake was the only fruit you ate.
Yeah, true. I've still got my chocolate cake. Life's worth living still.
Good.
Anyway, do we have a ghost story tonight?
We move swiftly from life worth living to the dead. Yes, we do. Not one, but two, and they have a common theme.
Yeah, and let me guess, they're both ghosts of people who died horribly.
Correct. You're getting the hang of this. The first one is at the Cooper's Arms pub in Rochester, Kent. Late at night in November, the ghost of a monk, bricked up alive for some sin, emerges from the wall behind the bar in this ancient building that was once a priory. Our second haunting is more close to us here in Norfolk and takes place at Vinegar Hill near Marham, where the ghost of a nun, known apparently as Sister Barbara, can be seen silently gliding across the hill. Legends say Sister Barbara used to hire men to pretend to rob travellers before she would intervene to save the travellers and drive off the robbers, and in due course she'd be generously rewarded. Unfortunately, she was spotted by a group of monks, reported to the authorities, and was bricked up alive behind a wall at her convent.
Just excuse me a moment, but how believable was it that a nun called Barbara, and that's no offence to all the Barbaras out there, was able to see off a big band of robbers? It's just not really believable, is it?
Well, she'd probably hold her crucifix above her head and say, "I call upon the heavens to blast down these terrible robbers," and they'd all run away in fear.
Yeah, okay, yeah. No, that's true. Fair enough.
Okay.
Now,
Yes.
on to this weird day in history for the 16th of November. And we have something for all the fans of science fiction and space travel. So, in 1974, this was the day an interstellar radio message carrying basic information about humanity and Earth was sent to globular star cluster M13 in the hope that extraterrestrial intelligence might receive and decipher it. The message was broadcast from the Arecibo radio telescope in Puerto Rico and aimed at the current location of M13 galaxy, some 25,000 light years away.
Unfortunately, it will take 25,000 years for the message to reach its intended destination, by which time the M13 galaxy will have moved away. So if there are any friendly aliens out there, they'll miss it.
And in the off chance aliens actually do manage to catch the broadcast and send a reply, great to hear from you guys, we're having a barbecue and a few beers on Saturday night, why don't you drop in? It would then actually take another 25,000 years for us to receive the message back, by which time we'll all have long since moved away. It just occurs to me, though, the irony of it being 44 years today later, and we still have no decent phone signal, let alone a broadband in Norfolk. So well done, BT. Thanks. Thanks for trying, not.
We've only just got electricity here, so be fair.
That's true.
And to neatly off our weird day, on the 16th of November 1945, 88 German scientists who had been working on the V1 and V2 rockets for Nazi Germany were shipped over to the United States to work on the American space program. The most famous of these was Dr. Werner von Braun. Those of you of certain vintage will recall Tom Lehrer once wrote a song about him. The final lines are, "Once the rockets are up, who cares where they come down? That's not my department," says Werner von Braun.
Ooh, nasty.
Over the past few shows, we've carried a number of witchcraft-related stories. What do you expect? We're recording this show in the heart of Witchfinder General Matthew Hopkins land. However, tonight we're going to be talking to Simon Entwistle about another of England's notorious witchcraft trials, the case of the Pendle Witches. Some of you will already be familiar with Simon through his monthly radio show, Ghostly Tales of the Unexpected. Those of you who aren't, well, Simon conducts ghost walks around Cumbria, West Yorkshire, Lancashire, and of course Pendle Hill, and he has a wealth of information about this topic. So Simon, tell me about the Pendle Witches.
Right, Charles, it's a very, very complex story. It is really this sort of story that if Steven Spielberg got his teeth into, he would have a Hollywood thriller, because every single angle of the story seems to reek of treason, reek of deception, reek of acts of sadness and acts of terror, really. But let's turn the clock back to that period of time, 1612. In East Lancashire, a place called Pendle, and in the centre of Pendle is a very, very large hill called Pendle Hill. The hill is still there to this very, very day. But in the year 1612, surrounding it would have been this huge, huge forest. Now, living in the forest of Pendle, which was 15 miles wide by 50 miles lengthwise, were various people that just wished to live away from society. Now, of course, we all need to eat. We all need clothing. We all need a roof over our heads. And these people were really no different to you and I. What made two of them quite unique is that two of them were over 85 years old. Demdike and Chattox, they were the names given to them as nicknames. Their real names were Elizabeth Southern and Anne Whittle. Elizabeth Southern, alias Demdike, lived in this little stone cottage called Malkin Tower in the centre of the Forest of Pendle. It sounds grand, doesn't it, really? But it would have been a limestone hovel, if you will, just one room. She'd lost her husband, but she did have her daughter called Elizabeth, and she lived with her and Elizabeth's three children, James, Alison, and Jeanette Devise. Living nearby was Bessie Chattox, alias Anne Whittle, in the village of Newchurch in Pendle, with her daughter Anne Redfern. These were the main Pendle witches, but as we advance into the story, we'll bring a lot more characters in. You can imagine every single day was really a fight for survival. There's no supermarkets, there's no doctors, there's no surgeons, so life would be very, very much a lottery. Our story really starts way back in the 18th of March, 1612, when Alison Devise left the stone cottage in the centre of Pendle called Malkin Tower. Alison was 14 years old, Demdike's granddaughter. She had a walk through the forest and came to the very, very end of Pendle Hill, where she had the misfortune, and it really was misfortune, of meeting a peddler from Halifax called John Law. When I say peddler, John Law was basically a walking salesman. He had a large pack in his back full of 1612 luxuries. He would go from village to village, hamlet to hamlet, deep in the forest of Pendle. He met young Alison. Alison begged of him, "Oh, please, sir, can you spare a few pins, sir, to pin me clothing together, sir? Get away with you. I'm not taking my pack off for you, lass. You've got no money. Oh, please, sir, you can spare just a couple of pins to pin me clothing, sir. Get away with you," shouted John Law. All of a sudden, out of the forest path, out of the bracken and the heather, appeared a huge black dog with snarling white teeth and glowing red eyes. And the dog sat next to Alison, and the dog talked. "Alison, shall I lame him for you?" Lame him, she screamed. Law felt this terrible pain down his left arm and left leg and collapsed in agony in the path in the centre of the forest. He lay there for a good 5 hours. The kind people of the small village of Colne in North Pendle, they could see him. They got a stretcher party together, and they carried him down the slopes of Pendle Hill from the forest of Pendle and into an old alehouse in Colne called the Greyhound Inn, which is long, long since gone. There the landlord, John Edrington, spoon-fed Law. He washed him and cleaned him, and as Law's voice returned, he shouted, "I've been cursed! There's a witch in that forest, a young lass called Devise. She's got a dog with her, and I swear to you, I heard the dog talk. She's in league with devil. Send letters back to me family." Edrington, the landlord of the Greyhound Inn, sent letters from Colne to Halifax, to the home of John Law, the Halifax peddler. John Law's eldest son, Abraham, received the first letter. "Hey, me father's in trouble. I better go and collect him." He set off from Halifax, arrived in Colne, and made his way into the Greyhound Inn, where he saw his father in a twisted and contorted state. "Father, what's happened to you, man? You look terrible." "Abraham, I've been cursed. I was walking through the forest of Pendle. I met this young lass. She's called Devise. She's got a dog with her. I swear to you, I heard the dog talk. I want you, lad, to go and find her and bring her here. Well, Abraham must have been a very, very brave lad. He set off from Colne, he walked deep into the Forest of Pendle and found this little stone cottage called Malkin Tower, deep in the forest. He hammered on the door. The door opened, and there was James Device, Alison's brother. Can I help you, sir? I want to see Alison Device. My father wants to see her. She's in here, sir. Alison came to the door. John Law grabbed her by the hand. Right, lass, you're coming with me. You've cursed me, father. He wants to see you. She protested, but was dragged down the forest pathways, down into Colne and into the Greyhound Inn, where she made eye contact with John Law on his sickbed. It's you, you're witch. You cursed me last, didn't you? That dog you had. I heard it talk. You're in league with devil, aren't you? This 14-year-old girl, on bended knees, with tears streaming down her cheeks, begged and begged forgiveness. Sir, please forgive me, sir. I didn't mean to do this, sir. Please forgive me, sir. Strange enough, John Law, the Halifax peddler, was about to forgive her, but not his son Abraham. Oh no, we'll have you for this. I'm going to go and get magistrate. Now, the local magistrate was called Roger Nowell. He lived in the village of Reed, near Burnley. His job, of course, was to enforce law and order for the entire Forest of Pendle region. He knew all about King James I's paranoia of witchcraft. Mm-hmm. He also knew about the book that the king had written called Demonology. And he also knew if he could bring this young girl to justice, he was going to curry favour with the King of England personally. So therefore, he gave orders that Alison should be arrested and brought to his home, Reed Hall, near Burnley. On entering Reed Hall, Alison burst into tears, and for the second time inside 24 hours, she admitted to witchcraft. She had no idea. She just admitted to a state capital offence. Roger Nowell was actually quite delighted as she continued. Sir, my grandmother's a witch, sir. So's Bessie Chattox and her daughter Anne Redfern, sir. We have these dogs. They're our familiars, sir. Familiars, said Roger Nowell. Yes, sir. These dogs came to at different times of our lives, sir, and said, look, we can give you special powers, but in return, we need to suckle from your flesh. The dogs are called Tib, Ball, Fancy, Dandy. They belong to the Forbes, sir. They give us special powers, sir. We also go to New Church in Pendle Cemetery, sir. We've taken hair and teeth from the corpses, sir. We make clay pictures of human beings with human hair and human teeth. We then crumble over the fires, sir, and people die, sir. Well, Roger Nowell was not scared. He was delighted. He had a confession. He gave orders that Demdike, Chattox and Redfern should be arrested immediately and brought straight to Reed Hall. They were brought to Reed Hall, and when they saw young Alison, this huge argument erupted amongst the four of them. They all tried to blame each other. Chattox blamed Demdike. Demdike blamed Chattox. Redfern blamed Alison. Alison blamed them all. But they all admitted to witchcraft. It was almost like self-confessions of how they made these clay pictures, how they had turned milk blue, how they'd cursed various people in the Forest of Pendle. The four of them were then sent straight to the city of Lancaster, where they were thrown into Lancaster City Castle Jail, a place called the Well Tower, which is still there to this very, very day. This deep, deep underground dungeon. There, in total darkness, they were chained to the floor, wearing the same clothes they'd been arrested in, and there they would have to wait for 4.5 agonisingly long months. In the meantime, in the Forest of Pendle, at the little cottage called Malkin Tower, Elizabeth Device, Demdike's daughter and Alison's mother, organised on Good Friday, 1612, the Good Friday meeting, where all the other so-called witches converged in the Forest of Pendle. James, Alison's brother, slaughtered the sheep from the fell. They dined on fresh mutton. They then got this large cooking vessel called a cauldron. They lit a fire beneath the cauldron, and the black saber liquid inside began to bubble and steam. And into that black bubbling liquid went crushed, powdered human teeth. We are told the odd clay pitcher, and we are told the odd human scalp. The whole idea was to get a potion together to blow the gates of Lancaster City Castle open and rescue their loved ones. However, nothing happened. What did happen, though, is word of this Good Friday meeting at Malkin Tower in the Forest of Pendle reached the ears of the local magistrate, Roger Nowell. He gave orders that every single person who had attended this meeting should be arrested immediately. When word got out to the Forest of Pendle that all those who had attended, a few thought, there's no way I'm going to hang around, and they disappeared. In doing so, they saved their lives. They were never heard of again. However, the ones that were successfully arrested were Jeanette Preston of Gisborne, a village in West Yorkshire, Catherine Hewitt and Alice Gray of Colne, a town in North Pendle, Elizabeth Devise, James Devise, Jeanette Devise of Malkin Tower, John and Jane Balcock, a mother and son from the village of Blacko, this incredibly brave lady called Alice Nutter of Roughly, along with Margaret Pearson of the village of Padiham. They were all sent to Lancaster, with the exception of the two Jeanettes. Jeanette Preston of Gisborne came from West Yorkshire, so therefore she was sent to the city of York, whereas the youngest of the Devise family, Jeanette Devise, at 9 years of age, she was sent to live with the magistrate at Reed Hall, Roger Nowell. She had no idea at the time, but she was indeed going to be used as a very, very, very important witness at the trials. The king heard about the trials and sent two circuit judges, James Altham, Edmund Bromley, a young boy called Thomas Potts, the clerk to the courts, along with Roger Nowell, the local magistrate, William Holden, and John Bannister, two other local magistrates. The trials began. In York, Jeanette Preston was brought in front of the York City magistrates. She was found guilty of, first of all, being at the Good Friday meeting in Lancashire. She was then found guilty of the murder of her employer, Mr. Thomas Lister. She'd been nursing him. He had died. She wrapped his body in a clean white sheet ready for burial, and 2 days before the burial, she touched the sheet and some fresh blood came through the sheeting. This was classed as witchcraft. She protested her innocence. Her husband begged for her release, and also other villagers from Gisborne came to York and they also begged for her release. The judges said, I'm sorry. The king signed her death warrant before she even arrived here, and Jeanette Preston of Gisborne, West Yorkshire, became the very, very first of the Pendle witches to be executed in the city of York at a place called Whitmer-Watmergate at the end of the shambles in York on the 27th of July, 1612. In the meantime, the others are being held in Lancaster. The conditions in Lancaster are absolutely appalling. Chained to the floor in total darkness on very, very, very meagre rations, lying in the clothes that they've been arrested in appalling conditions. Demdike dies before the trials begin, but she did admit under interrogation, apparently, to making clay pictures of human beings, crumbling the clay pictures over an open fire, and people were dying mysteriously. In her absence, she was found guilty of the murder of Richard Assheton by witchcraft, the child of Richard Baldwin by witchcraft, and the murder of Henry Mytton by witchcraft. Of course, she never ever faced the gallows, and she never ever faced the courts. Next up from these cells was Bessie Chattox, alias Anne Whittle. She was described by Thomas Potts, the clerk to the courts, as a skeleton in rags. She looked absolutely appalling, wearing the same clothes she'd been arrested in, lying in her own waste in total darkness. When she came out of the cells, she was blinking because the light was so extreme, and she was brought in front of the courts. There was no defence whatsoever because no one was prepared to take on the King of England. It was very, very much one-way traffic from James Altham, Edmund Bromley, Thomas Potts, Roger Nowell, William Holden, and John Bannister. Chattox was found guilty of witchcraft, the murder of Robert Nutter, the murder of John Devise, the murder of Anne Nutter, John Moore, and Hugh Moore by making these clay effigies and crumbling them over the fires. What is so unusual about her case is she actually admitted to witchcraft when she was arrested and sent to Reed Hall in April of that year. Next from the cells came Elizabeth Device. She was in, a terrible state of health, lapsing in and out of consciousness. She was found guilty of the murder by witchcraft of John Robinson, James Robinson, and Henry Mitten. She pleaded guilty to the charges. Now, her son, James Device, was classed really as a local dimwit. When he was brought up from the cells, he had to be carried in by two warders. He was again lapsing in and out of consciousness. He looked to be suffering from severe malnutrition. But he had actually confessed before his health deteriorated to witchcraft, the murder of Anne Townley of Townley Hall, Burnley, the murder of John Hargreaves, Blaise Hargreaves, and John Duckworth by witchcraft. Next up from the cells was Bessie Chattox's daughter, Anne Redfern. There she was found guilty of the murder of Christopher Nutter by cursing him. Alison Device actually openly admitted to cursing John Law, the Halifax peddler. But this is where the story gets quite intriguing, really. Three people were in court that day: John and Jane Bulcock, Alice Nutter. Now, what made these three totally different to the rest of the so-called witches is they made pleas of not guilty. Mm-hmm. John and Jane Bulcock were local farmers, a mother and son, and they'd had a few problems with land disputes, along with another lady called Alice Nutter. And out of the whole Pendlewick story, Alice Nutter is the one that seems to really capture everyone's imagination. Now, in the year 1612, women were not allowed to possess a brain. It was believed by some men that women didn't even have a brain. And when it came to male chauvinism, women suffered terribly in the year 1612 in this country. Alice had this huge problem. First of all, she could read, she could write, she was a noble woman. She lived in this rather beautiful hamlet in the Forest of Pendle called Roughlee. Her home is still there to this very day. It's a gorgeous Grade 1 listed building known simply as Roughlee Hall. She and her husband owned land, and they made their wealth by extracting rents off the people that lived on their land. However, Alice got very, very annoyed one day when she found that her fencing was being pushed back, cattle and sheep were being stolen, and she said to her husband, "Look, I'm a woman. I can't complain, but you can. You need to go to Lancaster City Castle to get our land disputes sorted in court." "I'm too scared," he said. "I'll go," said Alice. And she made the very, very fateful decision to make her way to Lancaster, and she walked into a court session to the words of, "It's a woman! A woman! It's a woman! Get her out! A woman! A woman! Get her out!" She grabbed hold of furniture. They tugged and tugged and tugged, but she wouldn't let go. And the judges said, "Well, let her have her say." In one afternoon, Alice Nutter won all her land disputes fairly and squarely. She brought with her maps of the area. She brought her original deeds from Roughlee Hall, and the judges awarded her all her land disputes legally and fairly. However, in the court that day was Roger Nowell, the local magistrate. He was furious. "This woman has really embarrassed me. I need to get rid of her. How can I get rid of her? I've also got John and Jane Bulcock, these other two farmers. They also complain about land disputes. I have this problem with the people living in the Forest of Pendle begging all the time of travellers. I've got these three farmers. I know I can incriminate the three farmers with witchcraft." He had a trump card up his sleeve. That trump card was the youngest of the Devise children, young Jeanette Devise, whilst her grandmother Demdike, her mother Elizabeth, her brother James and sister Alison had been sent to Lancaster. She had been sent to the home of the local magistrate, Roger Nowell. And for the first time in her life, she had a warm bed to sleep in, 3 meals a day, and nice clothes to wear. She had no idea, but Nowell was going to use her as his trump card. When the trials began on the 17th of August, 1612, in the city of Lancaster at the castle, she was brought in wearing a beautiful white dress. Noel picked her up and put her on top of a desk so the jury could see her. There she shouted, "Me grandmother's a witch! Me mother's a witch! So's me brother!" Her mother shouted, "Jeanette, stop it! You don't know what you're saying. Have my mother removed. She's upsetting me, sir." And she then pointed out Margaret Pearson, Catherine Hewitt and Alice Gray, Isabel Roby, as being at the Good Friday meeting at Malkin Tower. And then Noel pointed at John and Jane Bulcock and Alice Nutter. "Jeanette, these three people over here, were they at the Good Friday meeting at your home, Malkin Tower, in the Forest of Pendle?" "They were, sir." A look of shock and horror went across Alice's face, John and Jane Bulcock, as they realised they were indeed being incriminated for witchcraft. There was no defence, so they had to rely entirely on the jury for any form of defence whatsoever. The jury found them guilty of witchcraft. In the case of Alice Nutter, she was found guilty of aiding Demdike and Alison Device in the murder of Henry Mitten of Roughly because he wouldn't give her a penny. In court, she said, "Look, I don't need to beg. I'm a woman of wealth. I don't even know these people." But the jury found her guilty of witchcraft. John and Jane Bulcock were found guilty of the murder of a young girl 20 miles away near Knaresborough by turning her completely insane. They also made a plea of not guilty, but the jury found them guilty of witchcraft. The Pendle witches were then led out to what's called the pillory in the city of Lancaster, a rather horrible place of execution. Their hands tied behind their backs. They then had to mount rostrums with ropes around their necks, and then the stools they were standing on were kicked out from underneath them. These people did not hang. They literally strangled to death. Watching that day was indeed Roger Noel holding the hand of young Jeanette Devise. And as he looked up at the pillory, as the rope was being placed around Alice Nutter's neck, Alice very bravely turned round and shouted from the gallows, pointing at Noel, "I shall haunt you for the rest of your life." And then the stools were kicked up underneath them. Young Jeanette Devise watched her entire family hang that day, along with the farmers and indeed the other residents of the Forest of Pendle. And as soon as they stopped twitching on the pillory, Noel said, "Goodbye." She said, "What do you mean, goodbye? I'm not going back to that lovely hall of yours, sir, the warm bed, the 3 meals a day and the nice clothes. Goodbye." He'd used her. And poor Jeanette Devise made the long journey on foot from the city of Lancaster back to the Forest of Pendle to a cold and empty cottage, knowing full well that her evidence had claimed the lives of her entire family and other residents of the Forest of Pendle. The following morning, Roger Noel is summoned down to meet King James I. He is knighted and made the High Sheriff of Lancashire. James Altham, Edmund Bromley, the two circuit judges, are also knighted. Thomas Potts, who's the clerk to the courts, and this is the only reason we have a window into the whole story, in 1613, he wrote a book called The Wonderful Discovery of Witches in Lancashire, which earned him an absolute fortune. The book is available to this very day in paperback, and this is the only window we have into this whole story. It's a tragic story. It's a very, very true story. So we have a situation where we have people actually admitting to witchcraft, and we have people that weren't admitting to witchcraft. What we do find amazing, and I know that anyone listening to this broadcast can go to Google search, just put the White Witch of Pendle, and you'll see a photograph of Pendle Hill. You'll see snow, the last piece of snow melting into the perfect shape of a white witch. When we had the 2012 40th anniversary of this incredible story, as a member of the Tourism Association, I met with colleagues, and we got enough money to unveil a statue to Alice Nutter in her home village of Roughly. But we insisted that her back is facing Lancaster. She is in chains, and the artist did a magnificent job. Her face has a real look of innocence, and I look on Alice Nutter really as a woman who lost her life because she had a brain and she knew how to use it. And I'd put her in the same league as Emmeline Pankhurst, Grace Darling, the fabulous Edith Cavell. She's definitely a very, very brave woman. And there we have the story of the Pendle Witches.
That's fascinating, Simon. Quick question. Was there any evidence or suggestion that the so-called witches were tortured to get their confessions?
Many, many people have mentioned this. Let's be honest, for those people who've been to Lancaster City Castle, the Well Tower, which they now call the Witches' Tower, is still there. It's very, very deep. You go deep underground into total darkness. Now, the idea of being chained to the floor in total darkness, in the same clothes you've been wearing for 4.5 months, lying in your own waste and your own filth, to me is a form of torture. There's no two ways about it. When James Deviser was brought up from the cells into the courts, he was in such a bad state of health, he kept fainting due to lack of nutrition. He was suffering from severe malnutrition. The only window we have, Charles, is this book written by Thomas Potts. And you and I know that, let's be honest, witchcraft doesn't really exist. It can't exist. The stories against them are quite incredible, really. We do know that the so-called witches were basically peasants. They couldn't read, they couldn't write, they'd never left the forest before. And to arrive in the city of Lancaster would be like you and I going to New York, really, from a small hamlet into a massive, massive city.
Yeah.
For all we know, the evidence against them could have been fabricated. It could have been. We have to rely entirely on Thomas Potts. What we do know is King Charles was absolutely paranoid about witchcraft. He blamed witchcraft on the Gunpowder Plot. We do know that this part of East Lancashire is still predominantly Catholic, and the king was an ardent Protestant, a hatred for Catholics. And there's lots of families, these gorgeous manor houses like Townley Hall, Burnley, Sarsby Hall near Preston, Shireburn, Stonyhurst in the Ribble Valley, Chingle Hall at Goosner. They all have priest holes. They were all ardent Catholic families. So the king would have had a lot of suspicion around this area. But the impression I get, really, Charles, is that Roger Nowell really, really did want to curry favour with the king. And it worked very, very well for him. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah. Do we know what happened to the young child after Roger Nowell had finished using her?
Thanks, Charles. That's a great question. A very good question. Yes, we do know what happened to her. We know that she got back to the Forest of Pendle. We know she was apparently 9 years old at that period of time. 3 years later, a young boy called Edmund Robinson was walking through the Forest of Pendle. He said that he'd seen young Jeanette Device creating acts of witchcraft. Of course, because of her family history, this was taken seriously. She was arrested, sent to Lancaster, sent down to the City of London, sent back to Lancaster, sent down to London, sent back to Lancaster. And this was over a space of 3 years to examine her, if you will. And then Robinson admitted to making up the whole story. You could say that witchcraft, or the superstitions surrounding witchcraft, had completely ruined that young girl's life entirely.
Yeah. And one other question. I see, looking through some newspaper reports, that there was 2 or 3 years ago what was believed to be a witch's cottage found. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Absolutely amazing, Charles. I can, Charles. It is quite I'm so glad you mentioned this, Eric, because I had forgotten about that. In 2012, it was almost as if that cottage needs to be found. I got a very, very excited telephone call from United Utilities, the water authority, and met a lovely chap, the manager, called Carl. He said, "Simon, we've been working on a dam on the side of Pendle Hill." I said, "Oh, yes, another one, very well." Behind the dam, we saw a rocky knoll. We thought, let's have an investigatory dig. We started digging, and we came across the roof of a very old cottage. We thought, this is no work for water engineers. So therefore, we called in a team of professionals from Loughborough University. The archaeological students and the professors found this very, very old cottage. Now, as a tour guide, I felt, really, really delighted, Charles, to be invited to look at the cottage. When I arrived, it was almost like walking into history. I met the head archaeologist from Loughborough, marvellous chap, and he said, Simon, we've taken all the soil out of all the rooms. We found a recess in one of the walls. We carefully removed the bricks. Behind the bricks, we found the skeletons of 3 cats, and it looks very, very likely they were placed in there alive and bricked up alive. Now, this is typical of Pendle Witch folklore, to leave a familiar spirit to ward off other familiars. A witch has to have a familiar in the form of a cat or a dog or a toad, we're told. And you could say that those cats being placed in that recess were really to ward off other familiars from the area. What was interesting is ancient maps were found in Preston, and they located this cottage as being in Blackhoe, which means it was very, very much in the centre of the Pendle Witch story. However, one part of the cottage looked a lot more modern, slightly Georgian, if you will, with a Georgian kitchen range, almost like an extension. But they did find that the part of the cottage dated back to 1580, which means it would have stood at the time of the Pendle Witches. Was this Malkin Tower? We don't know. We really don't know. But we do know that John and Jane Bulcock came from Blackhoe, and it just could have been the cottage that they lived in. It's quite possible. Why it was buried, we don't know. But what we do know is it seemed to emerge just on time for the 400th anniversary. When they had the press release, we had the Daily Mail arrived, Good Morning America arrived, Japanese TV arrived, the Canadians, Australians, New Zealanders, and BBC TV arrived. And it was looked on as a very, very important find. However, the problems were mounting for United Utilities because in the early hours of the morning, souvenir hunters were coming from all over the country, and stones, large stones, are being taken from the cottage, large stones, and 3 people fell in the dam.
Right.
United Utilities mentioned this famous word, health and safety, and they said, sorry, we're going to have to rebury the cottage. They put visqueen, a very, very thick polystyrene plastic, over the top of the cottage, and it's been filled in. I know the exact area, but it's been filled in. And who knows, perhaps in 400 years' time, Charles, it might just re-emerge again. But health and safety was the main reason why they had to do this, really.
That's brilliant. That's super. Simon, thank you very much for that. That's a fascinating story.
Charles, it's a pleasure to talk to you. It really is a pleasure to talk to you. And thank you for kindly inviting me into the show. Thank you.
You're listening to Urban Fantasist with Charles Christian on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.
So what does the well-dressed witch or pagan wear today if they want to look alternative, but also don't want to look as if they buy their clothes from Halloween fancy dress catalogues? We're going now to talk to Michelle Eve, who runs the Magical Seamstress dressmaking business. Hello, Michelle, or the Magical Seamstress. Now, can you tell us a little...
Hello, Charles.
Can you tell us a little about the clothing? You call it alternative clothing. What's your market?
Yeah, my market is for people who like to dress more creatively and more originally. And that does tend to be a lot of sort of pagans and Wiccans and perhaps Gothic, people who are goths.
Yeah. Why did you go into this line of business? Because, I mean, when you look online, there are all manner of places selling goth and alternative type clothing, though having looked at it, it does seem to be you've got a choice of being either sexy witch or sexy vampire for sort of Halloween, or I was just looking at some of the photographs The Guardian printed the other day of the Samhain, or Samhain as it's spelled event in Glastonbury, and looking at the women's fashions, I couldn't help but think that they looked like the sort of things my hippie girlfriends in the late 60s were wearing, those sort of long dresses that look like they've been made out of velvet curtains, if get the idea. So
yes, I do. Well, growing up as a child, I had an older sister. Sadly, she passed away with brain cancer nearly 2 years ago. But having this older sister, who's 4 years older, she was very much into punk.
Yeah.
And it was being brought up with in that sort of atmosphere where you could actually wear what you wanted. Mm-hmm. And, I used to go to be snuck into the discos, the punk discos, and I'd see girls there wearing black dustbin bags as their dresses. And it really opened my eyes that you could express yourself creatively through what you actually wear. Mm-hmm. And for me, I've always had an alternative way, I do believe, of looking at life, and I think that it follows through in my clothing.
Yeah. And I'm looking at your website, which for anybody listening is magicalseamstress.com, and you've got range of tops and things. Now, are these mass-produced, or do you stitch them individually, or how do you produce them?
Yeah, I most of the patterns I will make myself.
Right.
So something takes a long time to evolve, and it's knowing what people like and what they don't like. So, and it's the development time as well. So some products I know what people will like, and other products I will try them out.
Yeah.
But I always try and give a twist on something, and I try to do clothing for the average sort of dress size here in the UK. Mm-hmm. Because I notice there's not a lot of choice for, people who want to dress a bit boho, a bit witchy, a bit pagan. There's not a lot of choice, if you're over a size UK 16.
Yes. I'm looking at your sizings, and you do go to very large on the sizings. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, that's what I try and do.
You're reflecting real women as opposed to the anorexic fashion model size.
Yeah, I think that there's a place for sort of everyone, but I've noticed personally there's not a lot of plus size clothing for fuller figured women, definitely. Mm. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Maybe I can make a mark there and make some women feel sort of better about what their choice of clothing is. It takes a long time to develop a product.
Yeah. And
I've got to like it myself.
Right. And I know when we were talking online earlier about this, you were very much of the opinion that a lot of the stuff out there isn't really very good quality.
No, unfortunately, no. I from my experience, I haven't found it very good quality. The cloth, the fabric, and the stitching, you can wear it for X amount of times, not very many, and it soon looks very dowdy and frail, and it will start to come apart. Perhaps that's just me, but that's my own personal experience.
Yeah. What's the sort of most popular styles of the things you're selling then?
The most popular style is definitely the pointed hood tunic top, because it's a classic sort of tunic top, but it's got a twist on it with the pointed hood and the bell sleeves and the pointed tailbone at the back. Mm-hmm. And I love making those.
They look to be in some gorgeous colours as well you've got there. Yeah.
Yeah. The colours are a very sort of difficult thing, because I know lots of people give me the feedback of they like deep colours. And as you were saying about watching, I think it was the Wild Hunt at Glastonbury, mm-hmm. the photos in The Guardian.
That's the one, yes.
A lot of people will choose velvet. And to me, it could be velvet could be worn. I think less is more when
Yes.
it comes to velvet personally. But I'd quite happy make someone a velvet long dress or velvet long tunic if that's what they wanted.
Yeah.
But I try and do a little twist on things, and I know exactly where you're coming from.
You were saying that you add a little magic to the dressmaking process. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yes. What I will do as I'm making the garments, I will. I suppose a lot of people would call it Reiki, which is Japanese means magic. I will put that energy into the clothing I make, and I actually did an experiment with my clothing, and I gave one item of clothing, lots of Reiki, lots of magic, and put it out there that the right person who will want this and buy this and wear this will come quickly and buy it. And I didn't do one to a very similar item. Now, the one I did all Reiki on sold very
Right.
quickly. And the one that I didn't put any of this magic on took ages to sell.
How weird.
Yeah, I mean, coincidence or not, but that has showed me something.
Is this your background then, the sort of magical side of things?
I guess you could say it is. I come from a very long line of psychics and mediums on the Irish side. My mother is Irish.
Yeah.
So I was brought up in the spiritualist church. I never went to any other church of any other denomination until someone got married. And I was in my 20s by then. So I've been brought up to believe certain things, and obviously I've questioned that because I'm not religious, but I have a belief in some sort of spirituality, and magic comes into play. So I'm quite open-minded in that respect. And I know when as customers call me or email me, they will ask me if I'm a witch because they feel comfortable if someone is of similar thinking or a similar path to themselves. They don't feel like they'll be torn down in shreds and have an opinion. Someone will have a negative opinion of them. So that's very important. And my background and my personality do come into play.
And I see also, looking on the site, you also do some messenger bags. Are these again things that you make from scratch as opposed to sticking a badge on the front of them?
No, at the moment, I've got a Green Man messenger bag, and I've actually made the Green Man myself. Just layers of felt and padding, and I've just used a certain stitch, a satin stitch, and sewn all around it. So I've, also again, I make the pattern for the messenger bags, and they're very popular. With the pentagram messenger bags, I was actually asked to make that. I probably would have never have made that, but someone's asked me.
Yeah.
And then, again, they're very popular. Yeah.
They're striking, those. Yes, it's very good. Do you have a sort of seasonal highs and lows in demand? I mean, we're into sort of maximum magical season now. We've just had Halloween and we're coming up to Yule and everything.
I know, yes. There's more demand from sort of January onwards. I don't know why.
Oh, right.
But I'll find I'm very busy January, February, March. I don't know why. Maybe it's the sort of products I'm currently selling.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No.
Maybe people have got money then, perhaps after Christmas, Yule, and, it's been lack of money to buy things for themselves.
Yeah, possibly they've come out with Christmas with some gifts of money and they haven't spent as much as they thought, so they can treat themselves.
Yeah, that's the trend I've seen, yeah.
And turning to next year, have you got any new products coming along you can tell us about?
Yes, I have. I'm just
give us an exclusive.
Finishing off. Yes, I'm just finishing off my first very cloak. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a plum colour, cloak.
A cloak, all right.
A full-length cloak, yes.
Right.
A hooded cloak. And it's a beautiful, blanket fabric, with a plum colour, with black lining, and it's got a beautiful Norwegian, Norwegian iron, some sort of Norwegian metal. Sorry, I need to look at my book.
Right.
And it's a clasp. It's so beautiful. So I'm really hoping that people like that.
And your products, they're all, well, obviously the messenger bags are, if you like, unisex, but the rest of them are all really for women, female anyway.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Do you get any?
Yeah, I will be bringing waistcoats out for men.
All right. Oh, yeah, that sounds interesting.
Yes, waistcoats. Yes, because my partner, he wears a lot of waistcoats. So, I think it's about time I treated him. I made him something. He can be, my tester. See how it goes.
Yeah, just remember to take the pins out when you're stitching it together. Yes. Using him as a model. Oh dear. Yes. Don't want to get nasty bloodstains on the product.
No, exactly. No.
Oh, that's lovely. Okay, Michelle, that's been a pleasure talking to you, and good luck with the
Thank you very much.
Here's Michelle's website address again: www.magicalseamstress.com. Almost time to go, but before we do, here's one final news story that may intrigue you. According to a report in the Times newspaper, Satan may now be driven out by English incantations rather than only in Latin, after the US Conference of Catholic Bishops made available a translation of the Church's official exorcism rituals. The move is intended to make the expulsion of evil spirits less challenging for priests. Clearly less challenging for priests who don't speak Latin, amid rising demand for exorcism services. Yeah, okay, but what if you're dealing with ancient demons who only understand Aramaic or Sumerian or Latin or Greek? Perhaps they think the ancient demons will now be thoroughly modern demons equipped with iPads and Google Translate? Whatever. Janie and I will be back on Thursday the 7th of December with more weird tales from the world of ghosts, folklore, urban legends, witchcraft and magic. But in the meantime, merry meet, merry part and merry meet again. May your gods and goddesses protect you from ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties and things that go bump in the night.
Black Shuck, the demon dog of East Anglia, is baying at the moon. Which means it's time for us to go. You've been listening to Urban Fantasist with Charles Christian, your fortnightly fix of weird tales, urban legends, magic and folklore. Keep in touch with us online at www.urbanfantasist.com, by email to urbanfantasist@icloud.com, and on Twitter at urban_fantasist. Good night. Join us again in 2 weeks' time for another edition of Urban Fantasist. The Urban Fantasist radio show is produced at Goat Pen Studios, Norfolk, England. Music by Jason Wick of Goat Pen. Find them at goatpenstudios.co.uk or on Facebook at Goat Pen Studios.